Testing audio, 1, 2.
And that's the second machine. Before it was ready.
Testing audio, 1, 2.
And the sales of the first machine dropped to near zero the day he made the announcement.
Testing audio, 1, 2. Yeah, I got the 2. Mine is.
And he had nothing to replace it.
Testing audio, 1, 2.
They were competing with K-Pro.
Testing audio, 1, 2. You hear me? Steve? Testing audio, 1, 2. 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 Great. Testing is concluded. Testing audio, 1, 2. 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 Good morning. Testing audio, 1, 2. Testing audio, 1, 2. Streaming, perfect streaming. Testing audio, 1, 2. Can you hear me now? Testing audio, 1, 2. 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 Great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next item on the agenda, President's remarks. I have none. We've got some things to take care of. So moving to the next section, public comments. Be advised, due to the fact that it's a special meeting, public comments are limited to the topic of the special meeting only. So anybody with public comments, same thing. Please name, address, and the floor is open now for public comments. Seeing no public comments, I'll close the floor for public comments. Move on to the next item, unfinished business. Just an FYI, as a point of order, this is the exact same motion that was tabled at the meeting on February 16th. So for those, just to refresh everybody's memory, this is the motion that we're working on by parliamentary procedure. This is the one we have to go with. So just to review, be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby approves the recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-2020, which budget was modified following presentations to the membership at the public hearing on February 2nd, 2019, in which budget reflects total revenues of $12,836,866 and operating expenses and transfers of the same amount, a basic annual assessment of $1,005, and capital expenditures of $5,472,079. Okay, so since we are discussing a tabled motion, there's no need to second it. However, what I'd like to do is Steve Phillips has presented a summary of where we are right now, and we're going to start with that to level set the expectations and to begin the discussion. So, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just put together a few slides that basically take the information from the summary package, which is out on the website now. And you can see that based on our decisions, this is the new revenue summary. Our revenues now are $12.532 million, and we have transfers into capital reserves of $5.075 million, and the $252,779, which represents the deficit recovery that we agreed to spread the current deficit over 4 years. Then the expenditure breakdown by department, and you can see a total of $12.526 million in expenses, and then the capital funding, which represents the reserve funding plus the minimal new capital project that we have included in the budget. This shows us the roll up to our current assessment of $991. This is just a summary slide. You can see that we're getting subsidy from our amenity operations of approximately $54. And this breaks it down further into all the different areas. Some of the changes that we'll get into in the further slides and highlight, but it shows our 991 and 1456 total assessment for the bulkhead owners. Here is our capital. We scrubbed the reserve capital, but you can see this breaks it down by department. The next slide will actually break it down by project. You can see our new capital in the assessment at the top there is only $6,500 now. Our reserves, 3.8 in replacement, 1.253 in roads, and then the 1.619 in bulkheads. Probably tough to read, but it's out there on the website. Breaks it down into those departments. Biggest thing on here, sports core addition was new capital and got removed. The software went down based on the information that we have from the working group right now with North Star. We took that number from 600,000 down to 250,000. That's really just the timing between the fiscal years. But that's the big changes on here. I think we also removed a truck in Public Works. That was about $24,000, so we scrubbed that down. Okay, on the operating side, changes from last Saturday. These are the high level, looking at reductions. This is all reductions on that. Ironically, the total of the reductions comes up to $312,000, which is 2.5% of our operating budget. $47,000 in marketing PR. 19, the bulkhead holiday for all the homeowners. Aquatics reduced 25,000, rec 23,000, finance, HR, IT 19,000, public works 7. We removed the interest on the debt for the sports core, and based on the decision to have replacement reserve funding cover the admin construction, we won't have any more internal borrowing. So 17,000 is that interest on debt service that got removed. Also, I've been working with our broker this week about healthcare. Medical premiums look to be coming in better than we had anticipated at the 10% increase, so I feel comfortable in putting some money in there to take that down in order to get us to approximately $311,000 in reductions. And then we had some, I guess, additional items. Obviously, the budget's a moving working document, and there was some I guess, things that we needed to actually add. Based on the motion last week, we had to decrease revenues on interest on delinquent accounts, $97,000. We had a compensation and fringe benefits study, which the directors talked about adding for next year, and based on the information that we obtained this week, $20,000 seemed to be a good estimate. Based on timing of North Star and breaking out the operating, the capital expenditures, North Star, we believe there's going to be maintenance that we're going to have to pay about $70,000 there that was not in the budget. And then we had some small adjustments for beach parking and pickleball. So there was a total add of $196,000. Net operating, when you take the reductions and the adds, $115,000 reduction. So how does that equate to the assessment? You can see we were at 1,005 last weekend, and we're down to 991 based on that walk that you see out there. And I just wanted to highlight here where we left things, I think, based on Director Tuttle's comments towards the end of the meeting last week, and where we were at is that right now, built in, all employees would pay 20% of medical premiums. All employees would receive a one-time pay adjustment for FY20 due to this change. And there would be a 2% merit pool budgeted, which would range from 0 to 4%. Anything over would have to be justified or approved. And as I mentioned, the $20,000 compensation benefits study to look at things next year and weigh compensation and fringe benefits as a whole. And then I think I touched on all these capital changes. The North Star piece reduced $350,000, and the sports core addition, removed that for $200,000. The admin building now 100% comes out of general replacement, and we removed the public works purchase of a truck for $24K.
Steve, thank you for that summary. So, colleagues, any questions for Steve before we start our discussion? All right. All right, floor is open for discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of comments, and I actually do have a question for Steve. In looking at the detailed payroll per department, we still have a position in maintenance department that's calling for approximately 6% increase. This is based on the information provided.
Can you clarify that for me? I understand there's been a one-time adjustment and there has been increase in the benefits as a result of that, but the aggregate change is approximately 6%. Just kind of, it doesn't add up.
So I would need to, I guess, see the exact number in reference to where you're looking. I mean, essentially the salary detail we gave you should have the 2% average merit and the one-time adjustment. So it's going to vary by person based on that one-time adjustment. I mean, somebody could have what looks to be a 15% increase, but it's really, you know, $2,000 that's based on that one-time adjustment. So if you can give me the information, I can get back to you.
It's, I'll give it to you. Obviously, we were working on this since, you know, last night, so I didn't have time to get back to you sooner. But the other question I have is related to the yacht club. There's a credit card line item on the expenditure side that has unusual increase in the expenditure from previous years to current year, 69% increase. And just calculating the increase in revenue versus credit card fees, you know, there's a huge discrepancy between the two amounts, and I was wondering what's causing these credit card fees to go up so high in expenditure. I just, you know, I can understand if people are paying more using credit cards than cash, but, you know, if the revenue is up only by 22%, why the credit card fees up by 69%? And you might not have the answer, you know, but it's something that certainly I would be very interested in having a look at.
It definitely would go up significantly based on the revenue and the volume, with also increase in patrons using credit cards as well. I can analyze it a little bit better to make sure. I mean, we definitely get you know, in terms of working with the merchant that we're working with now, we get very good interchange rates. You know, I've worked with with Ralph and the vendor on that. So, but we can look at the historical comparison.
Well, my final comment is basically to my colleagues with regard to this budget. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I'm certainly not ready to vote on this, certainly not ready to vote in favor of it if there is a call for a vote today. And there is basically a fundamental reason for that. The issue I have, it basically goes to how we as an association are dealing with a $1.6 million deficit that was generated last year. And looking at what the corporate world is doing to deal with this, you know, I'm basically a very, very big fiscal conservative when it comes to this. So the way we decided to address it, the major effort to bring down the deficit by $600,000 in a current year has been from collecting from the homeowners $71 per property. That translates into $600,000 reduction. So we brought the deficit from 1.6 million to down to 1 million, thereabout, plus or minus a few bucks. This budget calls for another $40 per property owner to fund the deficit. That's another $340,000. Yet we have $500,000 in payroll increase. I just don't subscribe to that kind of board approach to dealing with deficit. Is it necessary to do all this, to do it so quickly? I don't think so. Have we exhausted all other options? And I'm going to share the slide I put together this morning at 4:30 with my colleagues that shows the immediate actions, the cost-saving measures that can be implemented, and if necessary, what other actions can be taken, most of which have not been done yet. Yet we don't have a problem collecting from homeowners money. You know, the easiest thing to do is to increase taxes, increase assessments. Seems like we have adopted a government mentality. If you're in a private sector, do you think companies raise prices when they're struggling with their business lines? No, they really apply the efficiency measures. They look for cost savings. And I'd like to see that kind of a philosophy here. It's been demonstrated in a small way last year by certain small cuts, one of which was a HRA account, a cut by $100,000. But there's a lot more that can be done to improve our efficiency. Speaking for myself as an individual director, this budget proposed for the board consideration does not illustrate that. And for that reason, if this budget is called for a vote, I will vote against it as presented, simply because I feel there is more that we can do, because that's what I think the membership is asking us to do. Thank you.
Other comments? Right. Steve.
Slobodan, I appreciate your trying to help us with this. What I find troubling is here we are at the 23rd hour, and why hasn't some of these options come up before in our conversation? Why haven't you presented those? You said you have a slide you want to show the board now, but why haven't we seen that last week or the week before? I just find it hard to figure out. And you say there are options. I know that Public Works has scrubbed their budget very carefully. Aquatics has scrubbed their budget very carefully. Maintenance has scrubbed their budget very carefully. And we have made some reductions over the last week in several budgets. So I'm just not sure what it is you're proposing that we do.
Well, you know, it's pretty much what we've been actually talking about doing. One of the things we asked the previous general manager, that was board directive, is to come back to the board with a cost-benefit analysis of outsourcing certain functions. We talked about drainage, we talked about landscaping and other things. That hasn't happened. We still have a budget that calls for a landscaping line item of $28,000, I think, for Cattle Road. We talked about freezing salaries. We talked about not doing salary adjustments. We talked about cutting back on benefits, employee benefits, and instituting a greater contribution by employees towards health care insurance. And what we ended up doing is actually moving money around from one bucket to another, instead of doing what we said we wanted to do this year. We moved the money, basically we took money from the employees towards the health insurance contributions, and then we're giving them back the money in a lump sum adjustment. Just to me, that just, you know, it's playing around with money, and I just don't want to be part of that kind of a conduct.
Mike, anybody on the phone? All right, I'll make a comment. So some of what you said I can agree with. Some of what you said I'll disagree with. To categorically paint a picture that there was no effort to do any cost reduction is egregiously incorrect. There's a lot of it here. The other part of it is, and you guys know my philosophy about how much we should be in the operations. Remember, the department heads, the GM, they put the budget together and they present it to us for approval, okay? They are far more well-versed in the intricacies of changing exactly what they need in their line items in order to run their operation. It's not the board's responsibility to go in here and say, well, take $10 out of that line and $20 out of that line, okay? That is not oversight, that's micromanagement. We've been through this. I think, quite frankly, we've had a lot of very good and you know, good discussion on this. There's been a lot of ideas that have gone back and forth. There's been a lot of opinions that have been shared with regard to where we should be making adjustments. We've got a number of very important issues. The one I'm focused on is the change in the benefits payments of 80-20, and how do we make sure that we take care of our employees in a way that that doesn't you know, affect them negatively, but also doesn't burden the membership, doesn't burden the homeowners. So I think we've got to the point where we've got enough information. Should there be some additional tweaking? Absolutely, but you could say that about any budget. You know, once we pass the budget at a high level, quite frankly, let's also remember it's a budget. You know, slow down to your point about there's $28K in monies for capital. That doesn't mean it's going to get spent. All right, it just means that it's something that was earmarked, you know, for an expense. And quite frankly, if it makes more sense based on either A, priorities, B, other unintended consequences of things that happen during the operating year, that money might be available for being able to be used in another way. I think we are dangerously too close to meddling in the specific operations, and quite frankly, from my perspective, is not what the board is supposed to be doing. Yes, we should scrutinize. Yes, we should ask questions. Yes, we should challenge those who present us a budget to sell it to us, to make sure that they support it, to make sure that they give us reason to approve it, you know, so that they can run their operation. So I think, quite frankly, and I will commend, you know, all the folks, including everybody else, as I did last week, we've all been working on this quite a bit. We've also shared a lot of input. And quite frankly, going back to one of the other comments regarding deficit recovery, let's not forget that we had guidance from the Budget and Finance Committee that said we can't just continue to kick the deficit recovery down the road. In concept, yes, should we, you know, do we and should we and must we look for efficiencies in order to do that and not just put the burden, you know, out to the membership to say we're going to pay this back? Yes, I think this budget does some of that. But to suggest that all of the deficit recovery should be eliminated and we should look at efficiencies another way is not really prudent and based on the, again, the advice from the Budget and Finance Committee. We talked about paying it all back once, paying it all back over 3 years, paying it all back over 4 years, all right? We've all discussed that. And again, I'd rather go with the guidance of the folks who are guiding us in our financial decisions to say, hey, it's a good point, I'm glad we talked about it, but the guidance says this, we should at least decide that we're going to pay it back in 3 years or 4 years. So in summary, just, you know, I'm very reluctant to get into too much of a level of detail, not because I don't understand it, not because I don't want to, because it's our responsibility to make decisions at the appropriate level within the organizational structure. And I think it's important that we do that, and we let our staff, who are going to be owning the budget, who are going to be able to or be required to deliver services based on that budget, give them the opportunity to do that. I'm not going to hamstring them unless they come out with some, you know, ridiculous amount that says, hey, I want a 427,000% increase in my budget. Of course, we wouldn't consider that. So I think we are very close. I still would absolutely want to hear what we want to do with regard to the employee payback, the 2% merit pool, and the 80-20, and would ask my colleagues to, you know, weigh in on that so we can at least get to a point where we're close to, you know, finalizing some of this. Frank?
A couple of comments. First, I agree 100% with the idea of oversight versus micromanagement, okay? And us not getting into the operational detail. That being said, going back to the beginning of this budget process, where the Budget and Finance Committee came to us with some guidance that we in turn modified and sent back, the difference in getting into oversight and micromanagement is those instructions simply have not been followed.
Frank, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Ted,
And that's not getting into the operational detail.
Ted,
That being said,
Ted,
yeah,
wait just a minute, we'll give you the floor.
Yeah, Frank has the floor right now. You're next. Thanks.
we in turn modified, sent back.
So those instructions simply weren't followed, which put us into this scramble mode, okay?
There's a mute button probably there.
Sorry for the disruption, folks.
So the issue in not following those instructions and not following the guidance and the directives of the board has led us to a situation where we are again in the...
Are we still on, John, or not? I can't hear anything.
I can't get anything in here. Okay, here it comes. I can't hear anything, and I wasn't even saying anything.
All right, so I think the three of us are still on. Are we still connected or not?
Hey, Esther, John, Ted. Excuse me. Esther, John, Ted, you guys, can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right, please right now, Frank has the floor. We're gonna mute your microphone. When Frank's finished, Ted has the floor next, and I'll signal you when you can speak, okay? Thank you.
Okay. So those instructions haven't been followed. And again, we're in a situation of a board of possibly either A, not collecting what we need to run the association properly, or B, collecting more than we need to run the association properly. And that's not the place to be at the deadline, okay? Now, an example of that is this, and to get to the specifics, is the exact pay and benefit study that we're talking about. Last year, long before some of us sat on this board, there were specific instructions given on how to handle this situation. Those instructions were essentially totally ignored, okay, which puts us in here. And I look at something and it's like, well, if we do this, then we're going to be unfair, and we don't want to be unfair, so we're going to take money from here to here, and then we're going to get money from here. And I see the number $97,000 moving from 3 different pockets into 3 different pockets. And I think we have to address this, because I am going to be dealing with this situation next year. I do not think that the pain of making these adjustments are going to be any less in 2020 than they are in 2019, to either the homeowners or to the employees. And I think we have to go about implementing what we said we were going to do, what we communicated we were going to do as a board long before some of us sat down before we can approve this budget. It's simply a situation of we're unfair, it almost appears we're paralyzed to do something that will correct the problem, because there's going to be some hardship in it. And we got to correct it. It's not going to go away on its own. That being said, there are a couple other issues, okay? We talked about an operational assessment. I don't see that anywhere in the budget. I don't think that's going to be a low-cost item. So we're either looking at A, not doing it, B, guessing at it, or C, running a negative variance. None of those seem to be good choices for the situation that we're in today on February 23rd. Okay. There's also an issue that came up, and this is in terms of a moving thing close to the deadline with our interest revenue. You know, the miraculous $97,000 number showed up. We have to do what we have to do to comply with the law. But by the same token, we have to take into account some other things that we could possibly do that I don't think we've discussed. So all this together, there's some things. Now, specifically, okay, let me get into this 80-20. Steve has prepared for us a list of every employee in this association. He has a column that shows wages. He has a column that shows benefits. Some of those benefits are common across the board. Unemployment insurance, FICA, common across the board. We know what we pay for health care per policy. We know what the employees subscribe to. So instead of guessing and throwing out a number of $97,000, why don't we add a few more columns to that worksheet, figure out who's going to pay what, make adjustments based on that to get some kind of semblance of fairness. And I realize that fairness in my eyes is not the same as fairness in everybody else's, but make the adjustments based on what we said we were going to do and what we know we have to do, and then move forward with the 80-20 straight, the adjustments that are there without shooting in the dark, and set this thing up to be corrected in its entirety next year. That'll do for starters.
Frank, one question for my own personal edification. You mentioned something that the board did last year that got ignored. Can you make sure so I know I have a point of reference?
It was to move to the 80-20.
Mike.
It was to move to the 80-20, which was not initially done, okay? And to make the adjustments based on it. As Colette pointed out in an email to me, we agreed not only to move to 80-20, but to adjust the whole system based on that movement. That hasn't been done, correct?
That's not exactly what was proposed last year. It was to move to 80-20, but there was no discussion of look at the compensation structure as a whole until this budget discussion came up. So I think what was done by HR was what we asked.
Okay.
There's some
Stand
dispute
corrected.
about
No
the
problem.
quality of what was done, but we got what we asked for.
Yeah, and then to frame the sequence of events, it was, last year the HSA was removed, and then, and then we, slow down, it is correct. Last year, we removed HSA, and we said we needed to target at 80-20 for this year. We targeted 80-20 for this year, but the additional discussion started on how to, pay back, make employees whole, and so on and so forth. That's the new, that was the new. Ted, you were next.
Ted, you're up.
Ted, you're up.
Yeah, skip these now.
Did you say skip you for now?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
John? Esther? Any comment?
No, I don't have anything. No comment right now. Yeah, same here from John.
Yeah, I have a comment to make, and I'll be happy to pull out the minutes from last budget discussion in February, where the board discussed the issue related to the health insurance employee contributions. And what the board agreed at that time, and the reason I know vividly is because I was the one that presented the whole topic and pushed for the adjustment to start a year ago this time. And what I asked was to follow the market standard for employee contributions. In the end, what was decided collectively by the entire board is that we will defer the changes to this year and start with a 2-year process. This year being 10% and next year being another 10%. And we're not doing it, but that is exactly what the board decided. The minutes are there, and that's why I have decided to compromise and not insist on making the change that year, because we ended up with the HRA 100K saving, and the majority of the board decided to defer till this time to start with a 10%, and then next year to do another 10%. That is exactly what the board agreed to do.
Colette?
Slobodan, you're correct about that. I don't think anybody disputes that we had agreed to go to 80-20 this year. I think what's under discussion now is what are we going to create a soft land for the employees or not on that? And there has been discussion that I ran some numbers yesterday. The amount of money that's going to come out of paychecks per paycheck ranges from $50 to, what do you think, Steve? I can't remember what I calculated. 150 or 169, I think, was the top. That's a significant hit for some of our employees. And the discussion that the board has been having these past 2 weeks is, are we going to soften that blow, or are we not going to soften that blow? And the $97,000 offset, budgeting for $97,000 to offset is one way to approach softening that blow. The other one we talked about is the merit pool. And I think what we need to decide now is, are we going to do one or the other of those, or anything at all? And while I'm on the topic, we can take 4468 out of that 97, because we have a position that's not filled, will be filled, and will be filled with an 80-20 plan in place. So we don't have to create a soft landing for that individual.
Let me guys on the phone, anybody have a comment? Slow down.
Yeah, just to respond to Colette's comment, I think everybody on this board wants to soften the blow on the employees, the financial blow. I don't think that is being challenged by anybody. But I think what, I'm not going to speak for Frank, but for myself, what I'm not seeing is actually that some kind of a change to the employee contribution. It looks like it's basically a wash. Entire 100% that's being asked for from employees to contribute to is being given back to them in this form of a one-time adjustment. And I think that is basically what's at heart in terms of what we are discussing here. We're in essence not doing what we said we would do at least this year, 10%. Nobody's asking to implement everything all at once. We all recognize the fact that it will be a financial hit on everybody. But we should start somewhere with something, and we agreed this is the year to do it.
Colette?
So what I'm hearing you say is that we could look at other alternatives. We could, instead of 80-20, do 90-10. That's a softer landing.
That's what we said last
The other thing we could talk about is instead of a full reimbursement, the full 97, that we reimbursed half, which is the same as an 80-10 or 90-10 option. And that's what we're here to discuss. What are we going to do? Are we going to do the 97K, or are we going to do something else?
So, you know, again, all valid points. Let's also think about, you know, the future. I mean, we have an opportunity to, for lack of a better term, put this to bed right now. And I think it's important. We know we want to get to 80-20. We have an opportunity to get to 80-20. We have a mechanism in this year to make the staff not have to fully absorb that 20%, all right? So while the 90-10, I think, is palatable, it leaves us with a requirement for next year to continue this discussion, all right? And quite frankly, I don't want to squander an opportunity to make this correct again. Now, will the staff have to understand that next year their contributions won't get paid back? Yes, I think they will. And I would like to think that, I wish I had a better solution, but if we talk about the corporate world and so on and so forth, again, we talked about this being an issue that the membership did not want to continue to subsidize, but also wanted to be, I think, very fair. Nobody wants to leave a staff member out to dry. Certainly I don't. And I think it's reasonable for us to consider using the payback as a way to, lack of a better term, or to use the term everybody's been using, soften the blow. But then we're also giving everybody a year's, you know, notice that, you know, this is going to be the policy going forward, and we'd ask for, you know, obviously to have some consideration for staff members as they go through and select their benefits next year. Colette?
Yeah, my bias would be toward doing the payback this year. I'd like us to not make salary adjustments because we don't have the compensation and pay study done. There's been a lot of criticism about the comparables that were used for that, and we've made a decision that we're going to spend some money this year on the recommendation of Budget and Finance and our CFO to look at the entire compensation structure, not just the pay, but the pay and benefits value. And I would prefer to, you know, hold off on any pay increases, so take the $72,000 out perhaps for the 2% merit increases, and do what I think should be $93,000 for the payback this year. And then next year, realizing that there are going to be some people who are going to get some increases based on the pay study. There are some people who are not. Steve is looking at other insurance options for employees to have choices so that they can lower their costs by choosing a plan that maybe covers a little bit less or has higher deductibles. And so I think this year, the fair and simple way to go about it is to acknowledge that we're going to have a pay and compensation study that's going to result in adjustments next year, and do an offset this year that it's somewhere between 0 and 100% offset.
Other discussion. Frank?
Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement with that general concept. Here's the very specific issue that I have, and it leads back to, in my opinion, not getting the information that was asked for in a timely fashion. In the United States, typically 30% of the total compensation that somebody receives is their benefits. Okay? I think we'd all pretty much agree to that. Within Ocean Pines today, looking at the list that Steve prepared, the benefit to salary ratio ranges from a low of 4% to a high of 64%. So if you look at that detailed information, it may be at the lower end of the scale, you have somebody that makes $15 an hour that gets $11 an hour in benefits, and that is totally insane. Okay, so what I'm suggesting is simply this, and we have the information The question is, do we have the will to do it? Go there. Steve can tell you what each individual currently pays for health care. We know what 20% of that number is going to be. I could even calculate that, and I'm not that good at calculating anymore. Take that number and make that adjustment to that person to soften the blow, and do it on a case-by-case rather than we're going to throw out $100,000 and hope to cover the world. That number at the end, I don't know where it's going to be, but when it's done, we've made our one-time adjustment. We've done our best as human beings to soften the blow. We've done our best to be fair, and we've positioned ourselves next year to move into a compensation study where we look at the wages and benefits and get us on the right track and to eliminate some of the structural issues we have that's driving our payroll cost higher than the rate of inflation. That's my point, and we can do that now in time to get that information in this budget with the time that we have, if we have the willpower to do it.
Colette?
Frank, you weren't on the board last year, but maybe some of my colleagues will remember that what I had advocated for when we discussed salaries last year, and I think Ted agreed with me, was that we look at the entire compensation structure. I don't think we need to go back and look in our rearview mirror about what didn't happen. I think what we need to acknowledge is that now we're recognizing that we have a board that does want to have that done. I don't see a reason for us to be looking at 30% here, 60% there, 40% for another person at this point, given that we're going to have solid numbers next year. There are going to be a lot of adjustments and a lot of moving parts. And I would prefer to address that percent of that the benefit represents of the compensation next year when we have market numbers for that.
I'm only suggesting using that as a tool for the one-time softening the blow, okay? Because if somebody, if somebody's making $15 an hour, okay, and you look at, I believe the cost of a full, and I defer if I'm wrong to Steve, the cost of a full family-paid health care membership is about $15,000 a year, okay? That's $144 an hour that you're talking about. So if that person is enrolled in that plan and you're going to take 20% of it and make them pay it, give them a bigger adjustment than somebody at the upper end of the scale that where 4% of their total compensation is benefits. We can do that by line item. I'm not arguing against softening the blow. I'm not just arguing against, rather than throwing out $100,000 and hope it sticks at the right place, put it at the right places so we position ourselves to do exactly what you're talking about next year. And we've taken a two-step process, making it as fair as we can this year when setting ourselves up to be, again, as fair as we can next year with the data that we have. Now, can we do that today? No, we can't do that today. But what I think, and I can't speak for Steve, but if I had his spreadsheet and the information, it would seem like that's about a day's work to run down those 65 or 70 names, figure out what they're contributing, their health care program is, what the contribution is, and making that adjustment and summing it up and coming back to us and say, the right number should be X, and it should be allocated out this way. And then we have something as a board to say that, yeah, is it fair? In my mind, it is. In somebody else's mind, it's not going to be. But you know what? It's the best shot that we can take with the information we have at this point.
Frank, let me try to summarize for my own self. So, if I hear you, I think we're all in agreement that clearly there's going to be we're going to earmark some funds for some payback. Okay, so that's number one. All right. Number two, I think from a budget perspective, we have to agree that we have to include that number in the budget. Right now, it's been calculated at $97,000.
That I disagree with.
All right. So hold on. Let me finish. So we look at allocating across those 65, 70 employees. What you're concerned with is that there's an equitable payout based on their current salary structure. In other words, you're not just going to say 65 divided by this 4%, we're just going to add it in, right? You're saying, if you're higher, the 20% benefit cost to you is going to be a different amount than it is if you're in a different pay structure. So what I think I'm hearing you say is you're advocating that someone, and that's an interesting question about who, but someone will need to look at that and try to create some sort of equitable disbursement structure. Is that about, did I capture what I think you're trying to say?
I mean, I guess again I'll defer to Steve, but I think Steve can tell me, if I asked him the question correctly, if I say, given that we're going to move to 80-20, Steve can look at a specific employee and tell me what the per hourly hit is going to be on his compensation by moving that, based on the current health insurance he subscribes to. Is that correct? Okay, take that number, and at the end, when we add that together, it may be $97,000, and I might be shocked, or it might be less than that, or it might be more than that. But what we've done is we've figured a number specifically based on what they subscribe for health insurance, and B, as a board, we've given a direction on how that number is going to be dispersed to make it as fair as humanly possible, so that we can then tell the staff and look at them and say, okay, next year this is what's happening. We're going to go to, I think, the things we've agreed to. A fixed pool for salary increases based on merit. We're going to do a wage and benefit study and move you to where that's going to be appropriate adjustments, and we're going to be done, and we're going to take care of the structural issues that drive our compensation higher, the rate of compensation higher than the rate of inflation. Two-step process, clean, easy, as factual as we can do it. In fairness, look, I'll be the first guy to say, somebody's going to tell me what a SOB I am for doing it that way, and some homeowners are going to love it, and guess what? That comes with the turf. We have to do it.
So one of the things, too, Frank, is I like where you're going with it. I'm a little concerned about this quote-unquote sliding scale, and I'm thinking in terms of, making a concrete number, that we don't have to guess at. Because remember, let's go back. We're trying to pass a budget, okay? So if we add in a number of variables, and I'm not saying they're wrong, I'm just saying we could have this discussion ad infinitum, over the next 365 days and really accomplish nothing, all right? But the idea here is I would prefer to identify that pool of funding, okay? We didn't come up with that 97,000 by throwing a dart in the wall. Some data went into getting that number. I would say treat it as our framework in order to give that out. And you know what? We may be able to do quite a bit of what you're talking about. The edict or the mandate would be, hey, listen, make sure you disperse this in a way that has the employees' fairness, for lack of a better term, in mind, okay? But what I wouldn't want to see is, oh, we went through, in order to be fair to everybody, instead of 97, it's 123,000. I will not support that. But I think we have enough of a framework to say, listen, you've got a specific number, you've got some guidance, all right? Let's rely on the ability for someone, or some team, whatever we decide to do, to use fair and equitable disbursement, because if not, we're going to sit here, and we're going to sit here, and we're going to sit here. I think, to your point, the additional information is, yes, by the way, this is just this year. We will have a salary study next year. There will be some payroll adjustments based on a valid salary study. And also, we'll bake in an appropriate merit pool for next year based on all the factors that contribute to what we could put into a merit pool. All right, so you're sort of setting the employees up to say, hey, it is kind of your two-step process, but I don't want us to get hung up on, the minutia of 97 versus, 88 versus, 118. So, we've got a target number. In order to get us through this budget process, okay, we need to decide that that's the best way to do it. I think we're very close. I think the intent is there. I don't think we'll get a lot of blowback with regard to the concept of saying, hey, we asked you to pay 20% more, and we're willing to give you X, as a way to, soften that blow this year. And so I would just urge us to try to make sure we move forward, and let's not lose sight of the fact that we need to get a budget, move forward. All right, Frank.
I think we're there. I mean, it's easy for me to say Steve can do it in a day or two, but I think he has all the information to do that. Okay. Based on, I think, what we're talking about. I mean, if we know a person and we know what they subscribe to health care, and we know their wages are based on 2,080 hours, you just take that health care cost and go through some formulas, and at the end he'd have I would see a column that would say the adjustment should be. And it may come out to 97,000 if it's done right on the macro level right now. And here's the distribution based on the direction of the board. And the board, what we would do is make up that difference that we're asking the people to swallow this year. I mean, that's, at a macro level, we're saying we're going to go to 80-20, and we want to try to make that 80-20 as soft as possible right now with the one-time adjustment. We can calculate that by employee. Steve, am I mistaken in that?
Well, I think we have it. I mean, I think that is what the 97,000 is basically the difference between what they're contributing today and what it would go to 80-20. So, I mean, we are looking at it on a micro level.
So spreading that out and showing us what it would be per person is not that big of a deal?
It's basically
Excuse
done
me.
in my.
Hold it.
No.
One comment at a time, please. Steve?
I haven't seen it by person on the spreadsheet, what the adjustment per person would be. Does that information exist?
Yeah, I think there's a column there that says 20% medical adjustment.
Look.
Right? I mean, I can walk you through it, but it sums it up by person on that spreadsheet that I put yesterday that has a medical adjustment column on there.
Just, I want to make one, slow it down next, make one more comment. Remember, we're not in operations, okay? All right, I think we've got the framework there. We've got staff that are already well-versed in how to do this. There is no reason for us to be meddling at that level within the organization. We've got the information, we've got the framework, we've got a directive to the staff. Quite frankly, personally, I'm not going to sit there and tell Steve, give this guy this, give that guy. Steve, here's 97,000, all right? You understand the framework, make it happen, all right? I'm not interested in getting any more detail than that at a level board and higher. So, slow it on.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. You know, first of all, what we're really talking about here at the board level, and this is board's, one of board's duties, is basically to evaluate employees' benefits and compensation, and if necessary, make the adjustments. And I think that's what we're basically talking about here. We all are trying to make the best out of the situation that we are presented with. You know, we have a budgeting process that this year has turned into be a lot more difficult than it should have been. And we are struggling with trying to make the best out of the situation, but I'm uncomfortable with forcing ourselves to make a decision today when it's actually not absolutely necessary. We still have time. So why rush? Why force something that's not necessarily? We meet on March 9th, we can finalize everything and then vote with a level of comfort and confidence that we are doing the right thing. Right now, I don't think we are. And let's face it, we're talking about this micro things, you know, we're getting into the operations. I really don't think so. I really think the board is trying to do what we need to do at the policy level. It just happens to involve some operational elements. But we have a fundamental problem, and problem is called payroll. Over 50% of our revenue is in payroll. Last year to this year, payroll is increasing. Well, now with the final adjustments between last few weeks, we've dropped it down from 13.5%. We are now looking at about 10% increase. We're talking about making these adjustments, yet we're looking at a $500,000 increase in payroll. How is that possible? And there are some departments that are showing increase in payroll, almost 40%. So I agree we shouldn't focus on the micro stuff. I think we should focus on the big picture, and the big picture and the elephant in the room is the payroll. And we haven't really figured out yet a way how to do it effectively. And that's why we're struggling today with some of these topics. So, to summarize, the way I basically feel about this is we have asked homeowners to pay for deficit, for the mistakes that have been generated by board and by the management of this association. If this $40 this year passes, we will have collected $950,000 from the homeowners, yet we haven't really done much on the other side of the equation. As I said in a meeting last time, if we roll the deficit for another year, we're not going to, our Moody's are not going to change our credit rating. Our bonds are not going to tank and turn into a junk-rated bonds. It's not going to go from AAA down to C-. Yeah, Joe, that's basically the point I'm trying to make, okay? But this notion that's being sold, at least to me as an individual director, that we have to deal with a deficit, we're already dealing. We already had $600,000 collected from the homeowners. Why keep doing something that it's not necessary? As far as I'm concerned, it's a self-inflicted demand, okay? My point is, roll it another year, leave that $1 million, let's see if we end up with a surplus. Wouldn't that be nice for a change? That will reduce our deficit, okay? To have profit at the yacht club instead of budgeting for $100,000 in loss. One more year of losses. 100,000 loss in the golf course, another year of losses. Why don't we focus on getting everyone involved to bring better performance where the performance needs to be improved? And that's basically what I'm asking for. Make tough decisions, eliminate payroll adjustments, freeze salary raises if needed, do merit only for those exceptional employees that deserve recognition. But at the end of the day, you know, we've been elected to make tough decisions. Do you think it's fun sitting here and getting praises and also, you know, complaints from homeowners? It's not. It is really not. And I think all of us are trying to do the best that we can, but we do have to make some tough decisions. And I'd like to suggest that if we can't address some of these key topics, and if we are not willing to agree on this, I believe we don't have a budget that I feel comfortable voting on.
Esther or John, you guys just texted me. Do you have anything, any comments at this point?
Yeah, like, no, not really. I mean, I'm not happy with the assessment amount that we have. I just, at this point, don't know where we can cut it anymore. We've been beating this to death for 6 weeks. I don't know if we're going to get any further in another 2 weeks. I don't know. I'm really at a loss here.
John, any comment?
No, I stand by what I've said over the last 6 weeks as chair and the CFO. I've addressed all this. The MF has given me recommendations. We've actually even told you what to say on these items as far as voting. I don't know what else I can say right now without it making front page of the papers, but you all need to vote on this.
Ted, you want to ask Ted?
Ted, any comment?
Yeah, I'm in agreement we need to vote, and I'm in favor of leaving the 80-20 split in there, using the lump sum, getting the payroll study done, and adjusting it next year with the employees taking that 20% on. I'm pretty much in favor of exactly what Steve came back to us with in knocking the thing down. The other thing I would say is this: if you went with a 2.1% increase just to keep up with inflation, or 4% is what's really being proposed here, which also includes attacking the drainage issues and attacking several other things, the deferred maintenance that we talked about. I don't know how people think that could be free. And I am totally against not funding at least a portion of the deficit recovery. And I think we had compromised on 4 years, and I feel comfortable with that. So that's me.
I have a question for Steve. I want to make sure I got this. So right now I look at 2 buckets that we're talking about. One is the $97K for quote-unquote, you know, softening the blow / employee payback, and there's also $72K as a 2% merit pool. As of right now, and help me out because I'm asking the question, are they both in there right now? Okay. So one of the options we could think about would be to remove the 2% merit pool, keep the $97K in as we had beaten that topic to death, you know, and it could end up in reduction. I think we can make a case for that, you know, given that there have been some increases in payroll. We address, I think, the important point of the, you know, the softening the blow of the 80-20. So at $72K divided by 8,452, if we took that out, took the merit pool out, we're talking another $8, you know. So I'd like some reaction from my colleagues on that approach.
Yeah, I would say that we don't do the 2% merit, that we keep the 97K in, and that 97K is adjusted along the plan that Frank is outlining, so that we do that equitably across the entire employee pool.
I would accept that.
Any other comment on that?
What's the impact on that, bottom line?
It's an $88.50. I still believe that Frank's plan is getting too far into operational decisions. I would rather leave that 97K in and let the department heads and Steve, HR, look at how to distribute that.
So you're saying, are you
Yeah.
comfortable with not having the 2% merit pool in there?
Yeah, but we could reduce that 97 by 4468 for a vacant position that is going to be hired at
Yeah,
an
let's-
80/20.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's 50 cents,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, that's, anybody on the phone, any reaction to that?
So you're saying take out the 2%, it's really hard to hear, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, take out the 2% merit pool of 72K, leave the 97K in as we had discussed. The net effect of that is another reduction of $8 in the assessment.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
So from a procedural perspective, what we would need to do is to offer a friendly amendment to the motion that is on the table right now to hold on, let me get the wording right here. Turn that off. Turn that down a little bit, okay? So just to refresh everybody's memory, so the motion, as it went out on the table last week and is on the agenda this week, is with the assessment being at $1,005, okay? The information that Steve has presented basically is in conjunction with the assessment being at $1,005. I'm sorry, $991, okay? So, and help me out, I'm thinking this through. So we have to get two things. Number one, we can either, and I'll ask my board colleagues, actually I should ask the parliamentarian, can we do it all in one motion? Because clearly, you know, just presenting the 991 solution is just information. It doesn't really call for a vote. Maybe the way we could frame the friendly amendment would be to take the information from Steve, add in a removal of the 2% merit pool, all right, and then, you know, with a final assessment dollar being 991 minus 983. I mean, I'm just trying to frame this so that we can memorialize it in such a way that we understand. I don't want to make it too complicated, but we do have to have a friendly amendment to certainly the motion that's out there on the floor.
I think we can just change the dollar figure in the amendment as the friendly, I mean, in the motion as the friendly amendment. So take out the 1,005 and put in the 980.
Well, it's got to be in the form of a friendly amendment. Yeah.
Right.
It's got to be in the form of a friendly
Do you want me
amendment.
to create a friendly amendment?
Well, tell you what, let's get it out on the floor, and then we'll talk about it, okay? Because it.
I was going to suggest one more addition.
All right, go ahead.
It's, you know, I appreciate the effort that we are now discussing. I'm very much in favor of having this done. I would like to add, as part of the friendly amendment, that I would go along with supporting the amended budget if we also agree to drop the deficit from $40 per homeowner down to $20. And let's remind ourselves that we have also already collected $600,000. If we go down to $20, that's almost bringing deficit down by 50% in a 2-year period. I think that is very aggressive, that's very effective, and I don't think anybody will be saying that we are not really doing a good effort to get the deficit under control. So that brings us down to actually the neighborhood that we really were looking at in terms of the reduction, around $970. And just by going with a $20 collection for deficit instead of 40, I believe that is still being conservative from a board perspective and aggressive in addressing the deficit.
All right, let's get back to parliamentary procedure. I'd like to entertain, Colette, you had expressed interest in producing a friendly amendment to the current motion that's out on the floor.
I'm still working on it. So what I think what we're asking for is the friendly amendment to read, be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby approves the recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 minus the merit pool figure of $72,000, which budget was modified following presentation to the membership at the public hearing on February 2, 2019, and which budget reflects total revenues of $12,836,866 and operating expenses and transfers of the same amount, a basic annual assessment of $983, and capital expenditures of $5,472,079. So that, I think, is how we need to do it, is just approve.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment?
I'm sorry, capital expenditures actually changed on this rendition, so it's $5,081,579.
Okay, please update that number.
Say that again.
$5,081,579.
Okay.
I'll
And
second the motion or the amendment.
I just wanted to make sure we are not doing anything in that friendly amendment with the operating deficit. I just wanted to point out that.
No, the friendly amendment is as stated.
Okay.
All right, is there a second to the friendly amendment?
Second.
All right, discussion. Right.
I'm okay with the friendly amendment, but I think there's some other things. Specifically, I don't see, unless I'm missing it, unless it's lumped somewhere else and called something else, do we have the operational assessment covered in this budget?
I didn't see a line item for that, no.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to need to add that.
And that's an issue because, and I guess, we need to take a look completely stem to stern at how we are organized and how we are managed to do things better in the future than we've done in the immediate past. And we need money in that budget, and we need to start on that process, like, soon.
So, Frank, I'm in agreement with you. As a matter of fact, as evidenced by the email that I sent everybody the other day, we actually have two items that we cannot lose sight of. One is the operational assessment, and I gave you a resource we might want to consider to help us through. The second part of it is monies for executive search as we look to either fill the position or move to a management team. But we have to have some initiative there in order to make that happen. Okay, so that's got to be added back into the budget. Now, I know it sounds like we're doing the yo-yo thing, but Frank brings up a very good point that we just can't ignore that. We just can't hope it doesn't happen. We will need to do that, and we'll need to do that, as soon as possible. Whether or not that expense would hit this year's budget, I would ask for guidance from B&F, but I think we might be in agreement, although I'm not going to make a declarative statement here, that we could start expending those funds in the next fiscal year. But again, now it's February. We've got 2.5 months, that we're going to be without traditional leadership here, and that, I don't want to say bothers me. That's a concern that we can't just let it sort of ride and so on and so forth, or we might be in danger of getting in a situation that I know all of us don't want to be in. So I think we need to have some discussions with B&F. But I also think, this is going to sound interesting. We just kicked out $72K, from the 2% merit pool, and I think we should probably put some of that back in to cover an operational assessment and an executive search. For reference, when we used the Novak group 2 years ago for executive search, advertising, interviewing, screening, and so on and so forth, it was just under $25K. So $25K is a reasonable number for the executive search. All right. So the question is, how much should we consider putting in for the operational assessment. And, you know, at this point, I think it's just, it's important that we do that. Just looking for comments. Zonan?
Thanks, Doug. To Frank's point, the sooner the better. You know, my take on this is that we should not defer this till next fiscal year. We should start now. We have some potential candidates to do this. I also want to suggest to the board that we don't necessarily go all out and target all departments immediately because we know where the opportunities for improvements are. I don't know whether we need to do operational assessment on the police department, for example. From what I can see, you know, they're running very well. Chief is managing the department very well. And some other departments are, you know, pretty solid. And it reflects on the staff, their performance. But there are other departments where we clearly have an opportunity for the improvement. And I would like to suggest we start now. We figure out how much that may impact the current expenditure and focus on those 2 or 3 departments where we have an obvious opportunity for the improvements. So that's my take on how do we deal with the operational expenditure.
Now remember, let's refresh everybody's memory. We're still talking about the friendly amendment that's got it at 983. Is that correct? 983. So I guess at a high level, if we added 25K in for the executive search, that would add $3. Can we, I'd ask for some consideration. Yeah, well, you know, now we're getting into nesting the, you know, the amendments and the motions and everything.
I could withdraw my friendly amendment.
What? Well, you can, yeah, I know you can amend the friendly amendment. I'd ask for consideration to withdraw the friendly amendment and rephrase it based on this discussion. Is it, all right?
I think that would be appropriate, because I think we need one amendment that we
Yeah,
understand what
I
we're
don't want
voting
several
on
different. That's
with everything
correct.
in it.
So I would like to withdraw the friendly amendment and submit a new friendly amendment.
Correct.
And the new friendly amendment would read, be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby approves the recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-2020, which budget was modified following presentation to the membership at the public hearing on February 2, 2019, with the additional modification of removal of merit payroll pool of $72,000 and addition of expenses of $25,000 for an executive search process.
Bringing the total.
And which budget reflects total revenues of $12,836,866 and operating expenses and transfers of the same amount, a basic annual assessment of, Steve, could you plug that number in?
Should be 986.
986, and capital expenditures of $5,835,579, I think is what it adds up to.
$5,081,000.
But with the extra 25 in capital expenses, it's $5,835,579.
No, that wouldn't be capitalized.
Oh, okay.
OpEx.
Okay. So the capital expenditure stays at 810,579. Okay.
Yeah.
So are we okay with that?
Can I add? Go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we got the right number in there for expenditures.
12 million, I have what's in the original amendment.
So we need to change that.
Okay, what is?
12 million, is it expenditures or revenues they're asking?
The revenues and
12,532,996 for revenues.
532,996, sorry. Okay. Any other changes?
Can I suggest one other thing?
Sure.
In the friendly amendment, it said, based on the public hearing on February 2nd, I'd like to add, and the discussions had at the special meeting on February 23rd. Hold on. Yeah, hold on. Yes, we've accepted the recommendations from the Budget Finance Committee. All right. So for sake of clarity, one more time, we now have this friendly amendment. I just want to make sure, and again, bear with us, because, you know, we're memorializing this. We want to make sure the numbers are exactly what we agreed to, and there's no questions, and we can't go back and say, oh, you did this. No. And I know it looks a little cumbersome, but at the end of the day, we have to be very accurate, and I want to make sure, and I appreciate everybody the back and forth in order to get this correct. So, Colette, please, one more time to read the friendly amendment.
Okay, be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby approves the recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-2020, which budget was modified following presentation to the membership at the public hearing on February 2, 2019, and the discussions had at the 2/23/19 special Board of Directors meeting, with the additional modification of removal of merit payroll pool of $72,000 and addition of expenses of $25,000 for an executive search process, and which budget reflects total revenues of $12,532,996 and operating expenses and transfers of the same amount, a basic annual assessment of $986, and capital expenditures of $5,810,579.
Okay. So unless there are any other questions on the friendly amendment, Frank, please.
Question. The $25,000 for executive search is okay. I mean, that's historical for what we did with JB, but that assumes that the operational assessment's going to be done for free.
No, that's going to be done this year, in this year's budget.
Well, this year, but it may span over into next year. That's my concern. I mean, I don't want to nitpick. I mean, I'm not hunting for nickels and dimes, but, you know, if we start immediately with an operational assessment, and it spans past April 30th and goes into next year, we should have some agreement or some understanding on how we're going to handle that.
Yeah, we'll still need to fund it, obviously.
Yes, that's right, because, you know, I just, I don't know. I mean, it's a situation, I don't know who's out there, I don't know how fast they're going to do it and complete it, and I don't know what it's going to cost. So it could span over into next year.
Yeah, it's possible. I think, but I'd rather just get this taken care of now. I think we realize that. One could make that argument for any initiative we take on. It'll, you know, automatically or possibly span a fiscal year. But, you know, since we've gone through this, let's close the floor. The motion, the friendly amendment on the table, we read it once, everybody's squared away, so I'll call the question.
No, do we have a second?
Yeah, it was. You seconded it.
No, nothing to change that.
Thank you.
I'll second it the way it's written now.
All right. All right. I'll open the floor for discussion one more time.
Thank you. So to support the friendly amendment, I would like to recommend that friendly amendment be amended to also reduce the deficit recovery from $40 per homeowner to $20 per homeowner.
I don't accept that.
It's 30, not 40. I'm looking at $40.
Do I have a copy of this one?
I don't know what. Operating deficit under reserves, 30. Is the actual.
Well, it hasn't been accepted yet. You have the opportunity. Yeah, there's no acceptance to the, on the phone, is there anyone willing to accept the, change to the friendly amendment?
Reduce the deficit collection.
Guess not.
Seeing none, then we can't bring that to the floor. The friendly amendment stays.
To acknowledge whether they heard the
friendly amendment, what Colette just read a couple minutes ago, is that the finalized one?
There was a suggestion to reduce, there was an ask to reduce the deficit payback from
Down to $20
down to $20.
per homeowner.
And,
All right, I'm against that.
all right, so it hasn't been accepted. So the motion stands on the floor, all right, the friendly amendment, all right? So seeing no more discussion, I'll call the question on the friendly amendment. All those in favor of the friendly amendment as read? Do we need to read it one more time for clarity? I think we've gone through it enough.
Do you guys on the phone, are you clear on what the friendly amendment is? We're able to hear it?
Yeah, I believe so. What was the assessment number in the friendly amendment?
The assessment number was 986.
All right, that's what I thought. So I understand it.
Esther? Do you have any questions about it? Okay.
All right. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the friendly amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Ted and Esther, can we have your vote on the friendly amendment, please?
Aye.
Esther?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, so the friendly amendment passes. Now we move back to the original motion as amended by the friendly amendment. Oh, please, all right. So just for, guys, hold on, okay? Let's go. The friendly amendment was passed 7-0, correct? All right, I just want to make sure that that is made public. All right, now we move to the portion where the original motion that was tabled, I'll entertain a motion to accept the original motion as amended by the friendly amendment.
So moved.
All right. Any further discussion on the original motion as amended by the friendly amendment?
Excuse me? Read it again.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion as amended is, be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby approves the recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-2020, which budget was modified following presentation to the membership at the public hearing on February 2, 2019, with the addition and the discussions had at the 2/23/19 special Board of Directors meeting, with the additional modification of removal of merit payroll pool of $72,000 and addition of expenses of $25,000 for executive search process, and which budget reflects total revenues of $12,532,996 and operating expenses and transfers of the same amount, a basic annual assessment of $986,000 and capital
$986.
I'm sorry. Whew, you guys would have been mad about that. And capital expenditures of $5,810,579. 810. I'm sorry, 5,081,579.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
So, everybody understand the motion as amended, the original motion as amended? Unless there's any other discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as amended?
Second on that?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah, I think I
seconded?
seconded.
Yeah, Steve seconded it. All right, so all those in favor of the motion as amended by the friendly amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Esther?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, any,
Opposed? We have one opposed.
one opposed, any abstentions? All right, motion carries. 6-1. All right, seeing that we have covered all the items on the agenda, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Aye.
Esther, you.